Outside of Jayden Daniels, it's Laremy Tunsil, whose absence would be hardest for the Washington Commanders to absorb.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I am your host, your guy on the ground, David Harrison. And on today's episode, Washington's tight end room faces a staff change, and Ben Steele's departure leaves an immediate question on the coaching staff. But first, Laremy Tunsil creates the biggest non-Jayden Daniels chain reaction. Besides Jayden Daniels, who is the team's most irreplaceable player on the offense? That is a question that we got in the Everydayer Club mailbag. So I wanted to come through here, answer that question here in the beginning of this bonus episode of Locked On Commanders. We'll talk about the staff move that happened on Monday morning as well in the back half of today's episode. So the question is, again, which player's absence would create the biggest drop-off and the largest chain reaction across the entire roster? And so for the criteria here to kind of whittle down some of the players that were available in the pool to evaluate, you want to ask the question, how large is the drop to the next option after that player? How many roles would have to change around that player because that player is missing? Does that absence directly affect Jayden Daniels, right? Quarterback is what this game is all about. So how much does that absence directly affect quarterback Jayden Daniels? Can the scheme distribute that player's responsibility so that other people can kind of help carry that water? And then do the Washington Commanders have a realistic contingency plan kind of already in place? So we know Jayden Daniels obviously is the player, right, that the Washington Commanders can least afford to lose. But if you take him out of the conversation, who's next? And for me, that guy is left tackle Laremy Tunsil. Laremy Tunsil is the answer because his absence obviously directly impacts quarterback Jayden Daniels while potentially changing multiple offensive line positions as well just by him leaving the room. Washington's current tackle room includes obviously Laremy Tunsil. Then you got Josh Connolly Jr. on the right-hand side. I'm putting Brandon Coleman in here because last year when Laremy had to miss some time, Brandon Coleman was the guy that kicked out to left tackle, but you're basically robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Paul is an interesting way to use that euphemism because Chris Paul would then step in at left guard. Andrew Wiley, Trent Scott, Foster Sorrell kind of round out the group of names, right? Tunsil is one of the league's top tackles, while Connerly, he's developing right on the right side. We have faith and belief that he could become one of the NFL's best young right tackles, but he's still developing into that role. So the chain reaction here, without Laremy Tunsil, Washington would likely have to go the direction of moving Brandon Coleman from left guard to left tackle. That would then put Chris Paul into that left guard spot. It would thin out your proven youthful depth along the offensive line because with Tunsil and Coleman and or Paul at left guard, you now have a young guy who's kind of that first guy off the bench. You no longer have that guy. You're altering your protection to help Brandon Coleman much more than you need to actually help Laremy Tunsil. That includes reducing some of the eligible receivers you're going to have in your pass patterns because guys like Luke McCaffrey, et cetera, are going to have to chip block. Running backs are going to have to chip. Tight ends are going to have to chip. So they're going to be delayed getting out into their patterns. It's going to change the chemistry of the run game. And now you're asking your quarterback, Jayden Daniels, to account for more pressure, and you're telling David Blough, like, you got to call plays that we know can be blocked up by this new look offensive line without Laremy Tunsil. Of course, number two, and it's not a wide margin between number one and number two here, but number two, I think, has to be Terry McLaurin, right? I think Terry McLaurin has the strongest case if you just go by the gap in talent between the difference between him and the guy behind him, right? Because Antonio Williams is not a proven commodity yet, right? Like, he has not played an NFL snap yet, so he doesn't qualify as like being on this list or being someone that we can solidify and say behind Terry McLaurin is really a known talent there. Sonny Styles doesn't qualify for this list because he hasn't played an NFL snap yet, right? The Commanders' current receiver room doesn't have another established NFL receiver who brings Terry McLaurin's combination of route running, separation, downfield production, reliability, leadership, and connection with Jayden Daniels. Commanders have tried several replacements or did try several replacements, including like Chris Moore, who is back with the Baltimore Ravens now when Terry missed time last year, but nobody was able to replace what Terry McLaurin does. He's just that unique of a receiver, right? So could you interchange those guys? Like, could you make a case to me and say, well, it's actually Terry McLaurin over Laremy Tunsil? Sure. I think that they're close enough that you could, because if you're going to argue for Terry McLaurin, that wide receiver 2 by committee conversation, which, by the way, we're going to dive deeper into in the next episode of Locked On Commanders, works differently when Terry is the wide receiver 1, right? Without Terry McLaurin, your wide receiver 2 by committee is now your wide receiver 1 by committee. That's a completely different picture that nobody wants to take a look at. Chig Okonkwo, Antonio Williams, the running backs that we've been talking about, other receivers that are on this team, they can take targets, they can run routes, right? They can put, 11 guys on the field, but they're not going to replace what Terry McLaurin does, not just for the offense, but what he does to the defense and the attention that he draws away from some of those other patterns, right? Why he finishes second, however, David Blough can alter the formation. He can alter route combinations. He can alter target distributions to keep the offense at least functioning, right? He can't fully replace Laremy Tunsil, but he can kind of spread out the wealth a little bit. You can't have two guys do Laremy Tunsil's job without then taking away from the rest of the team as well. So for Terry versus Tunsil, the talent gap obviously goes in Terry's direction. He's the only proven top receiver target, changes how the defenses react to the Commanders, so there's definitely a ripple effect there. The critical connection, obviously, with Jayden Daniels, and the offense has already shown what it looks like without him, and it wasn't pretty, obviously. The case for Laremy Tunsil, you're protecting the franchise quarterback. That's probably like bullet number one in that argument. The loss would all turn out one, but two offensive line positions. Protection changes. David Blough's got to send different routes in. The Commanders don't have another established left tackle near Laremy Tunsil's level, and the offensive line instability affects all parts of the operation on the offense. I think, again, McLaurin has the biggest gap between him and the next receiver, but Tunsil creates the bigger structural problem. Terry's absence would change who Jayden has to throw to. Laremy Tunsil's absence would change how much time Jayden Daniels has, how the line aligns. It changes the entire makeup of the offense altogether. So that's why I give Laremy Tunsil the nod over Terry McLaurin. But again, very, very close competition, I think, between the two. 5, 4, and 3, Tressway, Frankie Louvu, and Daron Payne. And again, the guys that we've not seen actually play for the Washington Commanders right now, like Odafe Oweh, Sonny Styles, Antonio Williams, like all these guys, like Nick Cross, they don't really qualify yet because I can't tell you this is what this guy does for the Commanders. I can tell you what I hope they're going to do, and certainly at the end of the year, some of those guys could hit this list. But Tressway, I mean, even from a leadership standpoint, but field position, like this dude, arguably still the best punter in the game. I don't evaluate all the punters across the NFL, so that's why I say arguably, because I don't know for sure, but I think that we would have a pretty good case if we wanted to argue that Tressway is the best punter in the NFL even to this day. The holding operation, right? His holds have been very, very smooth. Situational football is something that he helps. Complementary football, the defensive starting position is helped out by him, things like this. And he helps Washington, even when the offense can't get going, kind of keep them in position to keep the game within a reasonable tempo, right? He's a legitimate candidate because there's no rotation around the punter, right? There's no other guy that could do this, but it doesn't have the influence over Washington's offense and the defense, every possession, every down, all that kind of stuff. So we put Tress at number 5. Frankie Louvu is number 4, and I know some of you are going to be a little bit surprised to have him on this list, but you're going to be more surprised to have number 3 on the list. But pressure, right? And we think that Frankie Louvu is going to get back to being the same Frankie Louvu that he was in 2024 this year. But if you're kind of saying, how is Frankie on this list when what happened last year? Well, I would say because of what happened last year, that's why Frankie's on this list. When you take Frankie away, we saw what happened to the defense, right? And the problem is last year, the defense itself, the defensive, decision-making, defense coordinator took Frankie away from the Commanders defense. It wasn't just the opponents doing things. Certainly the opponents were doing things to take Frankie away as well, but the internal staff actually did things to take Frankie away, which is a little confusing every day. As you remember, we talked about that a little bit, his usage and lineup alignment and all that kind of stuff earlier in the offseason. But when Frankie is taken away, whether it's done internally by the defensive approach or it's done by the offensive approach, bad things happen for the Washington Commanders. And then Daron Payne, listen, the reason Daron Payne elevates up this list because Dietrich Wise starting training camp on PUP, Dorrance Armstrong starting training camp on PUP, Odafe Oweh, an unproven commodity from this aspect of we haven't seen him actually do it against real competition in burgundy and gold. Caleb Chaison's the same. Charles Omenihu's the same. You got rookies, you got young guys. You just have a lot of unknowns in that edge position on the defensive line in general. Johnny Newton, listen, I'm a big fan of Johnny Newton, but is Johnny Newton going to be a better down-to-down player than Daron Payne is right now? I don't think you can say that. Javon Kinlaw, I think they're kind of shoulder and shoulder, right? So that's why he's one of the finals, but obviously not the top 2. I think it is that top 2. It's Laremy, it's Terry, then there's a gap, and then you have these other guys. Again, in 2027, this conversation might be different. Sonny shows up, Odafe shows up, Antonio shows up. They prove their value. Nick Cross shows up, proves his value, things like that. This list could be a lot more competitive, but right now, I think there's 2 guys, Laremy and Terry, and then you have the other guys on this list as well. So good question coming through the mailbag. Next up, we're going to get to some actual news that came out Monday morning, but I just didn't feel like, honestly, leading an entire episode with it. So forgive me if you thought I would, but Washington's tight end room is going to need a new voice. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Kalshi, the world's first open marketplace. It's not gambling in the sense that, it's like trading stocks, but you're doing it on real world events. Think about the Washington Commanders potentially making the playoffs. That's what you're talking about. You go to Kalshi, you find out what is the percentage. 42%. You put $100 down on them to make the playoffs or to win 9 games. There's several other options to win the Super Bowl, is one of them as well. You get a payout based off of that. It's real world prediction market platforms, and it's America's #1 with Kalshi. So on Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market. It's not like the other books that you're used to. This means that there is no house for you to compete against, and as the probabilities change, you can buy in and out of your position. So download the Kalshi app today, use the code Locked On, and you'll get up to $500 in bonus credits when you trade just $25. That's KALSHI. Kalshi. Trade on anything, 18 and above only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Ben Steele's departure leaves an immediate coaching question for the Washington Commanders. Thanks for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Everydayers, thanks for coming through for yet another episode today. And I want to thank all of you as well, while I have you here, for going to WUSA9.com, where you can check out my written work covering your Washington Commanders. And of course, that written work is going to be coming hot and heavy as we get training camp started on Wednesday. Unfortunately for the Washington Commanders, they've got some turnover to deal with here. The Washington Commanders announced on Monday, without further comments, that they have parted ways with tight ends coach Ben Steele. Right away, the initial reaction is this kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody really had any preparation for it or advanced warning of it. So obviously it wasn't going to be good. And the way the public records work, it wasn't going to be long before it was reported. It has been reported. I can confirm that Ben Steele, according to public records, was arrested on June 7th for DWI after signaling a turn and abruptly changing course. So basically signaling he was going to go one way, left or right, I don't know, and decided, I'm not going to go that direction. I'm going to go a different direction. Officer saw him, pulled him over, and did not submit to a blood test, according to the charge sheet as well. Some jurisdiction, there's also a resisting, obstructing charge on there as well. Some jurisdictions, if you refuse a test, that qualifies as obstruction. I'm not really sure on the laws there in Loudoun County or wherever this took place. I honestly couldn't even tell you what county it took place in. I don't have it in front of me, but just let you know, like some places that qualifies as obstruction. I don't know if that's what's happening here, but I don't want to jump to conclusions either. I'm told that he did report the arrest to the team at that point in time. He was placed on leave while the team decided its course of action. Obviously, its course of action is going to be he's no longer with the team. He was not with the team during minicamp. Wes Welker had stepped up and was working with the tight ends during mandatory minicamp. So is that going to be the permanent replacement? I don't know at this time, but the expectation is that Dan Quinn is going to announce the plan, the succession plan there tomorrow, Tuesday. We get a press conference with General Manager Adam Peters and head coach Dan Quinn ahead of training camp. So I guarantee it, and they know it already. They may just, I don't know, Dan Quinn may just come out with it right off the bat in his opening remarks. I don't know. We'll see. But obviously, we'll try to get more information on that on Tuesday evening. The team shouldn't make that announcement again. It could be Wes Welker. I don't know if it's going to be Wes Welker. I can just tell you that he was working with the tight ends during mandatory minicamp. Whether that move comes internally or not, if it's not Wes Welker, I'm not even sure, to be honest with you as well. The team, they interview lots of coaches during these processes. So even before they hired Ben Steele, like they interviewed a lot of people. They know a lot of people. The coaching fraternity is very small, is very close knit type of thing like that. So, if it would be an NFL coach that they wanted to pursue to take this job, that would be a little bit more complicated because they'd have to request permission and it would have to be a promotion, or else the team losing the coach that they want to hire could block it. And again, this close to the season and training camp, there's a really good chance that team would block it. If it's a college coach, I don't believe, I'd say it that way because I don't know all the details confirmed for taking a college coach away from their program, but I believe that would not be a problem. So the team could, in theory, if they had interviewed a tight end coach before hiring Coach Steele that they liked a lot, they could, in theory, take them from college program without hurdles. Confirm that on our own. Wes Welker, like I said, was working with the team. He was with the offensive coaches for their availability on June 10th. So, I mean, it would make a lot of sense if he was the decision. So more on that to follow, but that is the latest news. It's unfortunate. Obviously, it's been impactful. The good news is, if there's a silver lining from a football standpoint, because that's where I like to try to stick to, the Commanders knew about this. They've known about this for over a month, almost 2 months now. So this is not news to them. Like nobody in the tight end room is rocked by this. Like the public reaction is rocked by it because we just found out Monday morning. But the team, and I'm sure the players have known at least that a change was coming, if not why the change was coming for a while now. So we will keep an eye on that. We will hear more on that from Dan Quinn, I'm sure, tomorrow. And you will hear more from me today on the wide receiver 2 conversation. More mailbag questions to address before training camp begins on Wednesday. So that episode will be dropping Monday night into Tuesday morning. And of course, we'll have more content building up to training camp, kicking off Wednesday morning. So as always, I appreciate you coming back for those episodes, coming through for this episode and any other episode in between them. If you need to find me, you can do so on X at DHarrison82, on Instagram, DHarrison_82. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's podcast. And as I do every day, I want to thank the everydayers coming through for every single episode, for coming through for yet another one today. And of course, I want to thank everybody who came through for this episode. I appreciate you helping to make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And until we meet again, if you're out and about, please be safe, please be kind, and I will see you right here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.